Welcome to another episode of MTG Steam Brewery. This is a modern deck this time, not standard. It's been a little while since we did a modern deck, so I'm excited to bring you my own variation of blue-black control. It's been kind of on the fringes of modern. I haven't been able to find any video tech decks of this deck, oddly enough, in my searches online. Not that I can do too many searches, but I haven't been able to find any modern blue-black control deck lists, a bunch of old standard ones. So this is my version of it. I thought it'd be nice for there to be some version of it up online. So we'll get right into it. This is blue-black mystical teachings control, by the way, guys, if you couldn't tell. We're testing this deck, playing a bunch of fun cards. There's one Jace, Architect of Thought. In theory, this card can just go unanswered. Being able to just goes up to 5 after it comes down, or you can take it out for card advantage. So it has a lot of utility in a lot of matchups, just like it did in standard. Going up to 5 loyalty makes it pretty hard to burn out. It takes one. It'll normally take 2 burn spells unless your opponent's playing Fiery Justice. At which place, if they're killing your Jace with a Fiery Justice, I'm not sure you're too upset about that. His ultimate will normally not come up, only really against the control decks that don't have anything to answer him outside of Crypt Command, bounce it, counter it on the way back down, where you can have a counter war at some point along the way. There's one Pearl Lake Ancient. This card is it's foil, it looks really pretty, and I really like this card, and I think it's good in Modern. It is 6/7 for 7 with Flash. It's pretty expensive for Modern, but this deck is certainly not the fastest of decks. And since it has Flash, we can Mystical Teachings for it. We'll be able to play it at any point as long as we have 7 mana. So we are able to represent counter spells and removal spells all throughout our opponent's turn, and then be able to flash in a Pearl Lake Ancient, which is the main reason I wanted a Flash threat. Teferi, not quite what I wanted in the main deck. Definitely not. 3/4 will die to 2 burn spells. It can die to Path to Exile. It is pretty easy to protect since you can fight over anything, but it is also a lot harder to kill if you don't have a counterspell. Whereas Pearl Lake Ancient, if you don't have counterspells or ways to protect it, you just return 3 lands, and it goes back to your hand. So if your opponent's playing things that can kill it in one hit at sorcery at instant speed, you will normally play this at 10 mana, which will happen quite a bit in those matchups. So it's perfectly fine to have. We have 1 Snapcaster Mage. Little trouble finding some more, but 1 will do just fine. It allows a lot of our 1-ofs to act as more than 1-ofs, giving them flashback. Mystical Teachings helps along with this. We can tutor for it, play it, and then flash it back. Just gives a lot of our spells a lot of versatility. And since we are a slower deck, we'll be able to flash back a lot more of expensive spells. We do have 2 Augur of Bolas while we are not playing 2 more Snapcasters. Augur of Bolas has been pretty good. It's normally draw a card. It can't hit your lands, which is a little sad, but with 26 lands we normally won't have that problem. A lot of draw and scry as well. This will normally be able to help us find a lot more of our 1-ofs, 2-ofs in the deck, and it can block really early against Burn, which is a really bad matchup. Augur of Bolas is definitely a lot better than Snapcaster Mage, just because it will survive most attacks. Outside of Searing Blood or Searing Blaze cast on it, and in their main deck they normally aren't playing those cards, but you just kind of tuned for their meta. Augur of Bolas in my meta against Burn is very good, just because there's several Burn decks in our meta. We do have 2 Blacks and Zenith. I'm testing this over Damnation for now. Damnation is extremely expensive, due for reprint at some point. Maybe I'll get them then if it goes cheap enough. But Blacks and Zenith is what I'm playing for now. It's been very good. It serves a very good Damnation role. It also shuffles back in, so we can't Snapcaster it, but we'll be able to draw it more times than a Damnation. Shuffling in can be very relevant sometimes. It allows you to draw it a lot more times, especially with all the draw and scry in our deck that can come up quite a bit. So Blacks and Zenith has been perfectly fine, and against a deck like Affinity, sometimes playing this on 3 mana is going to be a lot better than playing a Damnation at 4, because it will basically do the same thing at that point. We do have 4 Serum Visions, one of the few cards we are tapping out for in the deck, but it is also 1 mana. It's draw a card and scry 2. Not quite a Preordain, but it's pretty close, and in Modern, it's one of the best 1 blue draw spells you can have. And in this deck, we just want to be able to go through our deck as fast as possible, while being able to represent as many things as possible. So this helps out a lot with that, because it digs through 3 cards. We do have 1 Blues and Zenith, just our version of Sphinx Relation, draw X cards. But with some of our lands in the deck, which we'll get to, this can actually act as a finisher. I've killed a few people with the Blues and Zenith, where this deck is just built to go long, so you build up a ton of mana over the game, and this is just a good way to spend a bunch of mana. There's also 1 Logic Knot. With fetch lands in your deck, this card is a counterspell on turn 2 if you played a fetch land on turn 1 or 2 and cracked it. So it's very useful. It can act as a very cheap counter spell in a counter battle, or if your opponent's playing around Mana Leak or Remand, this gets around that just because being able to pay X with this deck and having Delve on it can counter almost anything at almost any point in the game. Unless we just Delve to dig through time and have no cards left in our graveyard, this will normally be a very efficient counter. There's also one repeal. Testing this in the deck, seeing if I like it. I've liked it so far, but I've only played it twice. Both times I unsummoned a token with it. So that was pretty good for a repeal. And it was just 1 blue, kill target creature, draw a card. So far it's been really good. It can act as the bounce mode on Cryptic Command, being able to bounce non-land permanents. Sometimes we just can't kill them before they get too out of hand, so we can bounce them and try to find another answer. Or, if we just want to get tricky, we can bounce our Snapcaster Mage with this, draw a card, and replay Snapcaster Mage and do something. So it does have a little utility to it. There's 2 dig through times. Didn't want too many. Delve is very expensive when we're playing Logic Knot, as well as 2 dig through times and Snapcaster Mage. So we didn't want too many Delve cards in the deck, but looking at the top 7 cards and putting any 2 in your hand, definitely wanted us to have at minimum 2 in the deck, and I've been very happy with 2. Never really wanted a 3rd one in the deck, didn't want 1 either, so 2 is the perfect number for us. In a control deck where we're a deck with a bunch of 1 and 2-ofs, we just want to have card selection, not the raw card advantage of Treasure Cruise, because a lot of our cards don't do the same thing. They'll do similar things, but we want them at different points. So Dig Through Time is definitely a lot better in this version of the deck. Consume the Meek. It is a instant speed Wrath. It destroys all creatures with converter cost 3 or less that can be regenerated. The main reason to play Consume the Meek is because we can Mystical Teachings for it. This card is very powerful. Against Affinity, it will kill every creature in their main deck that I have ever known the deck to play. It can kill Celestial Colonnades. It's very good against Delver decks when they get Young Pyromancer tokens if you can resolve this. And it's just a nice utility card to have. Get you out of a lot of sticky situations. There are 2 Mystical Teachings. This one's in Italian, so I'll read it to you. Search your library for an instant or card with flash. Reveal that card and put it in your hand. Instant speed for 3 and a blue, flashback 5 and a black. This allows this deck to be full of 1 and 2-ofs, to be able to play more consistent copies. It allows our sideboard to have a lot of tricky things. Though a lot of our 1 of 2 and 2-ofs do similar things, this allows us to search for the right one at the right time, and just gives the deck a lot of raw card selection that the deck really wants, especially since when you can tutor for a Pearl-like Ancient to start killing your opponent with if you really need to, which I have done once or twice and it's worked out pretty well. Normally it goes and grabs a Blues and Zenith if you don't want Pearl-like Ancient at the time, and you just draw a bunch of cards the following turn. There are 2 Cryptic Commands. There's probably going to be 2 more at some point, having a little trouble finding them, but this card has certainly proved its worth in Modern. It was normally counter target spell and draw a card, but being able to bounce permanents and tap all creatures opponent controls comes up quite a bit. This card is extremely powerful. It has a $60, $70, and $80 price tag for a reason. It is more than proven its worth in Modern to a lot of blue decks, and this deck is no different. We actually probably want the full 4 just because we are such a hardcore control deck. We have 1 Dismember as a removal spell. Target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. That will kill most things in Modern. Very few things will survive this that can be targeted by it. So it's just a nice 1 mana, 1, 2, or 3 mana removal spell. If we have enough life to pay, we can play it at 1 mana. We can also just pay more mana as the game goes on. So it's very nice and flexible removal spell. We have 2 Smothers, a removal spell I like a whole lot. It destroys most of the creatures we really care about. It can destroy Manlands, Tarmogoyfs, Delvers, Monsters for Spears, Young Pyromancers, things like that. And it can't be regenerated, so it can get around any, like, Lot Withdrawal if that's a thing in your meta. But mainly, it's a 2-mana removal spell for Manlands, which is a big deal for this deck. Manlands can give any control deck a huge problem, while still being able to maintain flexibility as a removal spell. We have 1 Devour Flesh. It's efficient removal spell. It's 2 mana. Against a burn deck, there have been times I've just used it to gain some life of my own. I stabilized at 1 against a burn deck using Devour Flesh on Snapcaster Mage, and won the game from there over the course of several turns with just a bunch of counterspells. So it did serve some niceness there. If Bowls is a thing in your meta, this is definitely a nice Mystical Teaching targets to have. It's a way out if they have a bunch of Inumbras and don't have multiple creatures. There's 1 Bile-Blight. I love this card in Modern. In my meta, it's normally just going to be able to kill anything. And there are times it can kill multiple things. It's basically a Smother with some more versatility, even though it does cost black. I figured it was worth running just because of how powerful it can be. There is 2 Think Twice, just some more. This is just card advantage. This card is going to draw 2 cards, but it's instant speed. which is why I like it a lot, and just something to do on turn 2, which you really want to do with this deck. And then we have 3 Mana Leaks and 2 Remands as our counter spells. Remand is not a hard counter, but it will time walk your opponent on turn 2 and draw you a card more often than not. There are plenty of things that you just want to stop at least one time with Remand, just to draw some more cards. And sometimes when you're just struggling to hit your land drops, you'll Remand any spell they play just to draw a card. And then Mana Leak is a hard counter early in the game. If you get into a counter war against another blue deck, it can be very good there, because you'll be tapping a lot of mana in these counter wars, so Mana Leak can be a hard counter. We have 1 Batterskull, one of the other win conditions of the deck. This card is very hard for almost any deck in Modern to answer. I'm pretty sure every deck in Modern. When it comes into play, you get a 4/4, you get a 0/0 Black Germ, but it becomes equipped to Batterskull immediately, so it won't die. It gets +4/+4 in lifelink. Batterskull will bounce your hand for 3 mana, and you can equip it for its same mana cost of 5. So this card is just really efficient. In Burn, this is our best way to actually win the game, is getting to untap with a Batterskull and be able to counter Skullcracks. But you do have to be able to get to it. We can't miss Teachings for it. We can just hope to draw it. And with about our 4 Serum Visions, our Think Twices, our Dig 3 Times, Repeals, Augur of Boluses, filtering out our spells, it's just likely that we'll get this at some point in the game. Just hopefully early enough for Burn. But against most other decks, you'll have plenty of time to play a Batterskull and kill them with it. There's also 4 Nefarious Drownyard, my favorite win condition. This was huge in old Innistrad. Esper Control, this was one of its few win conditions if it played any others. Just because it's a land. Lands are pretty hard to interact with. Outside of Tectonic Edge and Ghost Quarter, there's not a lot of cards in Modern that will interact with Nefarious Drownyard. So we definitely wanted to play 4. We're basically a flash deck. Very few things we will actually be tapping out for. So we'll be able to hold this up pretty much every turn of the game. And against other blue control decks, Nefarious Drownyard is an inevitability that they just can't beat, because you're playing 4 to their 1 to 2 Tectonic Edge or Ghost Quarters. And if they Cryptic Command and Nefarious Drownyard, you just replay it, so they didn't really accomplish anything. There's 2 Ghost Quarters. Tectonic Edge is good, but against Affinity, they can just play around Tectonic Edge at every point in the game. They don't need to play their excess lands. They only need about 3 mana to function. So you want a Ghost Quarter for the early Blink Moths and Ink Moths you have to kill. Against Infect, sometimes you just need to answer into their Ink Moth Nexus or Pendle Havens, whatever's giving you problems. As well as it's a way to kill Dryad Arbor if you have a Devour Flesh in hand for those kinds of matchups. So it's just a nice utility card. If you really need to in a pinch, you can fix your mana with this by being able to grab basic land. I've had to do that once or twice. It's never amazing, but it can get the job done in a pinch. There's 4 Polluted Deltas and 2 Flooded Strands as a fetch land in the deck, with Dig 3 Times and Logic Knots in the deck. I definitely wanted to have access to 6 fetch lands. They're all blue. I didn't want any non-blue ones. Grabbing islands is the most important thing for this deck because we're a very heavy blue base with black as the splash. We have 4 Creeping Tar Pit. It's a man land. It's mainly able to just attack planeswalkers. That's the main reason to have this. Sometimes you'll equip a Batterskull to it and start attacking for 8 unblockable. But it's normally just going to be a dual land that enters tapped that can kill planeswalkers. There's 1 Watery Grave. Maybe there should be 2, but I've only ever really wanted 1. I normally want to fetch up Basic Island almost every time. Very few times I need to actually go get a black mana. So 1 Watery Grave has been perfectly fine for me. We have 1 Dark Six Shores. Why? Because it was signed by the proxy guy. I like to have more fun when I play Magic, and liking to look at my cards looking pretty. Dark Six Shores really did that, because to me this is super awesome, mainly just because it's signed by the proxy guy. So proxy guy, if you watch this video, thank you. I really enjoy this. There is 1 Halimar Depths to go with the 1 Pearl Lake Ancient. This is not solely because of that. It is a fine card on its own. Being able to look at the top 3, if you play this on turn 1, it can help you set up your draws. If you play it with Serum Visions in hand or Serum Visions on top, you can set it up to where you draw the 1 card you want and then scry the other 2 to the bottom. So Halimar Depths does a lot of decency in the deck, and without hardly any drawback, coming to play tap is not that big a deal. Then we have 5 islands and 1 swamp as our basic with 1 Orborg. Orborg can smooth out our double black spells and helps out with some sideboard cards we have. So there's our mana base and our main deck. A bunch of 1 and 2s as you can see, and the sideboard is very similar. So guys, I'll see you in the sideboard. Welcome back to the sideboard, which is really weird, but we're going to go ahead and get right into it. We're going to start off with 1 Notion Thief. If Treasure Cruise and Sphinx of Revelations are things in your meta and you think your opponent's going to be sideboarding out their answers, which normally they will, The only 4 creatures in our main deck outside of Creeping Tar Pit are 1 Pearl-like Ancient, which is really hard to kill with a move spell anyway, 1 Snapcaster, which they never really want to kill, they just want it to die in combat, and then 2 Augur of Bolas, which won't give most decks much of a headache. So we do have a sideboard package with a bunch of creatures. Noxian Thief being able to surprise our opponents. I did get to draw 2 cards off my opponent's Esper Charm the other day when he did it at my end step, so that was cool. I appreciated it. He appreciated it, was a little upset, but he understood. We also have 2 Master of Waves. This is for the blue-white-red control matchups. They're normally not going to keep in any number of Path to Exiles. They might keep in 1 or 2 if they think we're going to have some weird sideboard cards they can't beat. So normally this is going to be a 2-1 that they just can't kill. They can kill a token, no big deal, but a 2-1 protection from red can be just good enough in several matchups to be worth having. It also dodges things like Abrupt Decay, so it can be good against the Jund deck if you just want to sideboard in something that can block Tarmogoyf and be able to attack them, though you normally just want it for the blue-red matchup. There's 1 Pack Rat. Once again, when your opponent just sideboards out all of or most of their removal spells, and you play a turn 5 Pack Rat, make a rat, most decks will lose to that. I did win one of my games with this. I played it its first FNM. I just went turn 2 Pack Rat, untap, and won the game with Pack Rat. It didn't take too long. It was very difficult for my opponent to kill it. He didn't keep in any of his paths, I think. He sideboarded them for game 3, because he drew 2 of them to kill my Pack Rat and the token I made with it. But it did a lot of work. There's 1 Empty the Pits. This just substitutes Pearl-like Ancient in decks that are too fast for Pearl-like Ancient to matter, where you can play an Empty the Pits earlier in the game, even if you just make 4 2/2s. That's 8 power and a lot of blockers if you really need to. In this deck, you can get a lot of cards in your graveyard very quickly. Plus, this card's just really cool. I like this card a lot. I was very excited when I saw this card printed. It reminded me very much of Arm of the Damned, but at instant speed, we can tutor for this with Mystical Teachings, and cast it in the same turn if we have enough mana. Against grindier decks, we're going to have enough mana, so this card can do a lot of work. As well as it's just another threat to sideboard in if you really just want to go haul in on the threat package for control matchups. We have 2 Logic Knots, just another 2-mana counterspell. Against combo decks, Remand and Mana Leak are not the most amazing counterspells that can play around them for most of the game. They just don't have to bite it, and they can wait. Especially a deck like Storm or Just Cast into combo, they can just generate a bunch of mana. Logic Knot is a lot harder for them to play around just because it has Delve, so you'll be able to play it for a lot more than they can play around. There's 1 Squelch in the deck. This is kind of the gotcha card, being able to counter target activate ability and draw a card. It just has some utility. Maybe it should be a Shadowed Out in the sideboard, but in my meta, people are already playing Shadowed Out, so people expect that. Squelch, you can't really play around as easily just because it just counters one thing, and you get to draw a card, so it's never terrible in the matchups you bring it in, because it can normally cycle itself. There's 1 Echoing Truth. There are a few tokens decks. Young Pyromancers do run around occasionally, so having being able to answer all their tokens is going to be a big deal. Sometimes you need to be able to bounce Batter Skulls, which are kind of expensive for a repill to bounce. So being able to bounce something and all cards that share a name with it, sometimes that comes up, like with tokens. It's going to be a nice utility card. And once again, our Mystical Teachings make all these 1 and 2 as perfectly fine cards to have in our sideboard. We have 3 Devour Flesh. This is really good against the Infect deck, which is actually a really hard matchup for us, just because a lot of their things can stop it from dying, especially in games 2 and 3. So having a way to get around or make this card hexproof. Once again, if Boggles is a thing, this can get around that. And then against Team Geist, if that's a deck in your meta, it's a blue-white-red Geist of St. Traff deck. It is very nice to have an answer to Devour Flesh. It's very nice having an answer in the form of Devour Flesh. So that's there. And then we have 2 Spell Pierce. Just a nice card to have access to. It's a cheap counterspell. It's very good in cheap counter wars. There are very few times that you sideboard this in that it won't have a purpose at some point in the game. There's also 1 Drown in Sorrow, but I seem to have lost it somewhere. But I know I have it somewhere in all of my cards. But I wanted to get this video out to you guys within a reasonable amount of time, because I know it's been such a long time since we posted this. This is going to be going up the same day as another video, unless I've already done that video, in which case it won't go up. But you'll definitely see this one. So there's my version of Blue-Black Control, guys. As usual, it's very weird. Playing some cards that might just be awful, but could get the job done. I did get to equip Pearl-like Ancient with a Batter Skull, and win that way. I did get to empty the pits for 6, but die to a Blood Artist, so that was kind of sad. And, like I said, I got to draw 2 cards off Esper Charm and kill someone with Pack Rat. So, these fun cards, when they come out of the woods, can do a lot of things in Modern when people just aren't prepared to handle them. So guys, there's my sideboard, the main deck, all the win conditions, as few as there are. So, hope you guys enjoyed it. You guys might play this. I called it Dimir Durdle, and it lived up to its name, because it Durdles quite hard. As usual, guys, you can find us on Twitter at PearsallsBlog. My articles go up on mtgbrodeals.com, where they have content almost every day of the week except for Sunday. So go there, check out whatever my content manager decides you guys should see that day, because it's always good, in my experience. You can also email us, pearsallsblog@yahoo.com. There is a subscribe button on the YouTube video you're watching right now, or on the page, wherever it is, if you, for some reason, full screen this, just to see the cards better, like I normally do. Hit the like button, maybe, come on, maybe. And, as usual, as well, you guys have a great day, and we'll see you next time.